To some very disturbing news. If you watch this program, you know how pathetic and unhinged the Democratic Party has become. But now some on the left are actually turning to outright violence. Others are now openly advocating to assassinate Elon Musk, who has become a lightning rod to these radicals, and really for two simple reasons. One, he's working with and he's supported President Trump. Number two, he has been exposing and rooting out waste, fraud, abuse, and I would argue when we get to the bottom of it, a lot of corruption within our federal government and what the D.C. swamp has been doing with your hard-earned money. Now, because of these reasons, Democrats, they no longer care that he's going to rescue, and I pray that this goes well, astronauts, lost in space and kind of abandoned from the International Space Station, or helping those that were in need after Hurricane Helene with Starlink terminals that he donated after the wildfires in California. Again, he stepped up, he donated again. And they don't seem to care that he's working to restore vision to the blind and movement to those who are paralyzed and with spinal cord injuries with something called Neuralink, nor do they seem to care. The environmentally obsessive left Democrats, they don't even care that Elon Musk created by far the most successful electric vehicle company in the entire world. In fact, threats and acts of terror against Tesla are now becoming common, and it's getting scary. In Colorado, one Tesla dealership has been attacked multiple times since January. At least one individual is now accused of trying to set the dealership on fire, hurling Molotov cocktails at cars, spray painting the word Nazi on the building. And this past Friday, there was yet another attempt to burn the dealership to the ground. Meanwhile, in the state of Oregon, someone opened fire on a Tesla dealership there, firing at least 7 rounds, damaging cars, breaking windows. And take a look at your screen. Just yesterday in Seattle, 4 Cybertrucks, you can see it right there, were torched near Boston. More than 6 Tesla charging stations. They were set ablaze by the lunatic left. And there have been reported acts of vandalism and violence against Tesla now all over the country. And sadly, hate to ever report this about anybody. I don't really care what your politics are. Now Elon Musk himself is facing constant real death threats, including one woman on TikTok openly calling for his assassination while bragging she's not paid taxes in 7 years. Other lunatics openly hold signs at protests calling for Elon's murder. Just today, X was temporarily shut down because of a major cyber attack. According to Musk himself, quote, there was, still is, a massive cyber attack against X. We get attacked every day, but this was done with a whole lot of resources, either a large coordinated group and or a country is involved. Now, contrary to the incredibly dumb talking points from Democrats, Elon Musk is leading Doge, and he's losing money in the process. He's not doing this to make money. He's losing it. And you could see now, all these attacks have led to the demonization of him, and it's hurting his business. His important work for the Trump administration is bad for business, and Tesla stock is down. His companies and products are under constant attack, all because he is daring to expose waste, fraud, abuse, and auditing the federal government. And by the way, you know what? I hate what they're doing to this guy. I'm going to go out. A friend of mine has a Tesla. I've driven it. I loved it. It's a great car. And I just frankly want to support someone who's given up an awful lot to help our president, help our country, save us a ton of money, and get us on the right track. And by the way, according to Kelley Blue Book and others, Tesla is the single most American-made car in the world. In other words, more American part, over 80% of the car is American-made. Those are American jobs. All these lefties attacking the Tesla, they're going to lose high-paying career jobs for people. And as I said last week, the Democratic Party is completely soulless in spite of Hakeem Jeffries. We've got him on the run. We'll get to that later in the program. Now, we witnessed this last week when Democrats, they wouldn't stand for mothers that lost their children, or a 12-year-old young man that survived cancer, or the wife of a law enforcement officer that was killed, or a young man that lost his father and is now going to West Point. They couldn't bother to stand and clap for any of them. And whether or not you like Elon Musk, he's right about, simple truths and a simple fact. The United States, our country, is spending itself into oblivion. We will not survive as a country if we keep spending like this. We keep robbing from our children and grandchildren. And this is your money. And the average American makes $66,000 a year, and they're spending and wasting hundreds of billions of your dollars. Keep in mind, the federal pre-COVID budget was $4.5 trillion. It is now over $6 trillion after Biden's wild 4-year spending spree. Now, think about that. The pandemic's long been over. Spending levels never went down under Joe and Kamala. Now, that brings us to a Hannity investigation into what Joe and Kamala were doing with your money. Let's start with Stacey Abrams. She apparently was granted a $2 billion contract to buy energy-efficient appliances for low-income Americans. Take a look.
I led a program called Vitalizing DeSoto. We worked in a tiny town in South Georgia to demonstrate that by replacing energy inefficient appliances with efficient appliances, you can lower your cost. And based on that program, a coalition of organizations, famous organizations, came together and said to the EPA, if we can do this here, we can do this for millions more Americans. Let us invest the money of America in lowering the cost for Americans. And the EPA said, okay, great, go for it.
Now, sadly, that is only the tip of the iceberg. For example, Biden's $1 trillion American Rescue Plan spent almost no money on COVID recovery, instead cheated, and created this giant slush fund for state and local governments, including billions for California and New York and other deep blue states. Billions went to housing illegal immigrants that they allowed unvetted into the country. New libraries, $2 billion was sent to non-existent country level governments. $400 million went to renovate state parks and trails in Michigan. Joe spent a whopping $15 million on a sports complex in New Jersey. Nearly $1 million to build luxury apartments in Connecticut. $738 million went out to cover 500,000 convicted prisoners, including the Boston Marathon bomber. And get this, there were even $1,400 stimulus checks sent to Japanese citizens that were living in Japan. And that's not all. According to a study for the Center for Renewing America, more than $1.1 trillion was directed to programs infused with diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, on top of all the USAID money that went to DEI and the Green New Deal and transgenderism and wokeism. I mean, this is madness. We could spend all night talking about trillions of wasted taxpayer dollars, your money that Joe and Kamala burned through in the worst imaginable ways, causing inflation, high taxes, economic suffering, and yet Democrats are violently angry with Elon Musk for trying to identify this waste and abuse to save our country from what would be economic doom down the line. They're, of course, insane. And by the way, they're not just angry at Musk. Anyone connected with Donald Trump faces an angry, left-wing, radicalized mob. And, of course, this includes the vice president and even his young family. Take a look at this.
Ma'am, look at my 3-year-old daughter now. And I told you, I talked to you for 5 minutes. And now, I did not agree to have my 3-year-old to have people run around and yell at her. And I did talk to you. And I had said, if I talk to you for a few minutes, will you leave my 3-year-old daughter alone? And you said yes. So I'd like you guys to respect that. Okay. Thank you.
Now, the vice president responded on an X. He wrote, quote, "Today, while walking my 3-year-old daughter, a group of protesters followed us around and shouted as my daughter grew increasingly anxious and scared. I decided to speak with the protesters in the hopes that I could trade a few minutes of conversation for them leaving my toddler alone. Nearly all of them agreed. It was mostly a respectful conversation. But if you're chasing a 3-year-old kid as part of a political protest, you're messed up. Vance is absolutely right. But sadly, Democrats, they continue to spiral. But according to Hakeem Jeffries, Republicans are on the run.